Hi there, dear friends. This is Bob Hatton. This is the Encourager. So glad once more that you've joined me again today as we now very slowly but surely coming to the end of what we call the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible. And we've seen something of this mighty plan that God has got for me, got for his church, got for his people, got for this world and even the universe. And this is so exciting. We started off, we started with creation and saw that God had created everything, and then we saw Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and saw how they failed, and we followed the development of mankind and how he tried to become greater than God by building the Tower of Babel. We want to make a name for ourselves. We're going to build a tower that gets into heaven, and God comes and he confuses the languages, and that's where the origin of the nations that we have. We see then a little bit later that God calls this man called Abraham, and Abraham becomes the father of all those who believe. He experiences God in a unique way as he believes everything that God has said, and God accredits him to righteousness. He becomes right with God. He has a miracle family, as he is already 100, his wife is 90 when they have the baby. Just 4 generations later, Jacob, he moves then from Canaan, which God had showed Father Abraham that he has to move. He moved then because of a famine to the nation of Egypt, where one of his younger sons was already there and made quite a name of himself, becoming something like the prime minister of that country. And so they moved there and they stayed there for a while. But when a pharaoh, a king of Egypt, arises who didn't know Joseph, who doesn't know anything about the heritage, he decided to enslave these Hebrew people. Now, this enslavement is a terrible time, and then this is where Moses comes onto the scene, and God uses Moses to deliver Israel from the hands of Egypt. And these slaves, they leave Egypt, go into the desert, miraculously cross the Red Sea, and then spend another 40 years wandering around in the desert until God takes them into the promised land under a man called Joshua. What an exciting story. This is still a failure and success and up and downs, but now we come to the time of the judges, and this is a terrible time. Actually, we saw 6 different cycles of people, the people of God. They did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he gave them over to their enemies, and they had very difficult times, and they began to call on the name of God. And so God sent them a deliverer. The deliverer came, he set them free, he restored normality, and then the whole thing starts again. And they did what was evil in the name of the Lord, in the eyes of the Lord. And each of these circles that they go through, one is getting worse than the other, and the last one is absolutely shocking. It's absolutely terrible, and it just shows us the depth that mankind can sink to. But then a guy called Samuel comes on the scene, and he's like a breath of fresh air, and he brings revival to Israel, and Israel turns back to the Lord. And this leads to the appointment of the king. The first king was Saul, who started off quite well. He was one of the prophets. In fact, they said, is Saul also one of the prophets? Because he had a prophetic anointing on him, but he didn't stay in that. He started off well and ended bad. Now, the next king is David, and although David didn't do everything right, he remained a man after the heart of God. His son was then Solomon, the 3rd king of Israel, and he was very good at the beginning. He really was very good. He consolidated the power that Israel had, and he built the temple, and he experienced the presence of God coming down to him. What a wonderful time. he had, what wonderful experiences he had. And it's so surprising that towards the end of his life he went really bad, started to worship foreign gods and so on. We went through all this, and his son then he splits the kingdom into the northern kingdom, which is called Israel, and the southern kingdom, which is called Judah. Things don't go well. We have some good kings, most of them are bad though. And in the year 722 before Christ, the Assyrians come and they destroy Israel, the northern country, the northern kingdom, and they carry away all the people captive. Then in 586 BC, only a few years later, then also Judah is captured by the Babylonians. The city of Jerusalem is destroyed. The temple is destroyed, and the people are taken away captive. But there is a time of restoration, and that's where we've come to now. And it seems so exciting because the King Cyrus, the king of the Persians, he says the Jewish people can go back home. And 40,000 of them decide that they're going to go and they're going to rebuild the temple. And it just seems like the hand of God is with them. I do believe that he was with them. 40,000 want to go. And King Cyrus, he gives them a leader. He gives them a governor for Judea. And the name of the governor is Zerubbabel, who is a descendant of David. And this is just part of the prophecy that the kingdom will remain in the hands of the descendants of David, upon the throne of David. There'll be no end. And then there's also a high priest is appointed, and it just turns out that he is from the tribe of Levi, which was where the high priest should come, but also that he is a descendant of Aaron, the brother of Moses, and that's also where they should come from. And he also comes actually from the house of Zadok, who was the last house of the high priest. So everything is perfect. And then King Cyrus says, and the golden vessels that were taken from the temple when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, the Jewish people can have them back, and they can take them to Jerusalem, and they can build the temple. So this looks like this, we got all these green lights, and that looked great. And then the disappointment comes. First of all, they're disappointed in their leader Zerubbabel because he's so timid and he's not very strong at all. He can't face the Persians. He can't explain to them why they should continue to build. He's a big disappointment, but so is the high priest Joshua. And it seems like he's got some skeletons in the cupboard. There's some stuff that's not right in his life, and God reveals it through the prophet. Even though he can get forgiveness, even though he can be restored, he turns out to be a disappointment. And now, we're just going to have a look at today. Even the temple itself is a disappointment. In chapter 3 and verse 11, they finish the foundations. They lay the foundations of the temple. Now we can see how big it's going to be. We can see something of the dimensions of this temple. And when the young men see that, who have no idea, they start to cheer. They are rejoicing. They are so happy. They are so glad, and they've never seen anything like this before. God is going to have a house among us, and this is going to be so good. This is going to be so great. But when the old men see it, they also knew the dimensions of Solomon's temple, and this was so pitiful. This temple that they were now building, it was so small, and it didn't have anything near the size that Solomon's temple had. And they knew it. They just didn't have the resources to build the magnificent building like Solomon had. I mean, Solomon, he was a very rich man himself, and he was ruling over the nation that was one of the superpowers and which was so rich. He didn't need to save any money at all, and he poured in lots and lots of resources, and he had lots and lots of workers to work on the temple. The people building the temple now, they are refugees. They've come back and they are not very rich at all. So we can understand why the building isn't built. But then, what is missing is also the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant is that which made the temple of God in Jerusalem different than any other temple upon the face of the earth. Because with the Ark of the Covenant, that's where the presence of the Lord came. Now, some people say that the Ark of the Covenant was probably destroyed when Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple, and of course that is quite possible. That's a great possibility. We do read actually in the book of Revelation, and the Ark the Ark of the Covenant is actually mentioned that it's in heaven. So it might be that God took it out and it's there, but it could also be destroyed. But anyway, it wasn't there. And despite all these disappointments, there is something here that touches an expectation, because the prophet Haggai, he said, the glory of this coming temple, the glory of this coming temple will be greater than the glory of the former temple. Now the old men have the picture of Solomon's temple in their heads with all the glory and everything, and they see this little old temple that they're building now. So this is no way greater than Solomon's temple. So there must be another temple coming, and of course people think that there's going to be another physical temple built in Jerusalem. Personally, I don't really believe that, but I believe what God is doing now all over the world by establishing churches. Paul talks about them, about his being his temple, and everywhere where there is a church, everywhere where the people of God get together, there is God's presence, and God wants to reveal himself in glory. He wants to reveal himself in power. And just read, please, Ephesians chapter 2 and 3. This is so exciting, and this is something that just awakens an expectation within us that God is not finished yet. We got the promise, and even though there's a disappointment, God is not finished yet. And as we proceed, we can let our expectation just grow. Well, that's it for today. So God bless you. Have a good day. See you tomorrow. You're Bob Hatton, your encourager.